Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie Mann. I'm with Festivals and Events Ontario, and this is our Festivals Helping Festivals Roundtable, sharing with each other. And the subject today is security. My co-host is...
Hi there, I'm Marnie Lapierre. I'm with Festivals and Events Ontario and am located up in Timmins. And we are happy to all be here today to have this really important discussion. Basically, the season is done and it's time for planning for next year. And security is one of the big issues of the day. And I thought it'd be great to address three of these topics, but if there's something else regarding security or alcohol consumption, crowd control, and all that you'd like to ask questions on or put out there, some of your experiences over the past year, please jump in. This is a kind of a kitchen meeting. Let's sit down and have a chat. And if you got your coffee, tea, or beverage of choice ready, let's have at her today.
Wonderful, cool. So, there's just in the news recently in was it Taiwan or Korea, where there was 125 were injured and 13, I think, dead because of a crush. So, there are things going on around the world in the festival and event world that security is really important, and planning around that is really important. So let's jump into crowd control, Marnie.
Okay.
What kind of things do you have on that? And I will share with you all something that one of our members sent to us on crowd control, a rule of thumb about how to measure that, which I thought was really interesting. So over to you, Marnie.
Okay, so crowd control has come, as Debbie has mentioned, very forefront in the industry because of the, I don't want to say lack of planning, but perhaps not understanding the energy in a crowd or how your layout can affect it. I do believe the event that recently happened was in Seoul, Korea. And I just saw that Jay has posted the link regarding the incident that happened there. And, aside from all of us being event organizers or affiliated with an event, we've all attended events as spectators. And I know myself, I've gone to some where I might get a little annoyed because perhaps the entry was not planned appropriately for the venue. And, it can cause frustration. It can cause people to react with negative behaviors where, you really want to keep everything nice and calm. And that's where, a security team, a site planning team can come in to really make a difference. And I know not every event has that kind of requirement. Like there are some very small events that, these are walkthrough events. There's no congestion, but there are many events that, if it's a very important occasion or a talent that will attract a lot of people, these things have to be addressed, and you have to work with a team. And I've worked from one level to the other in events, and I've been very fortunate to have had worked with great teams that helped to plan this out. And I'm just wondering, is this something over this past summer, now that seem to be returning to normal, did you find there was a need to change what you previously did when it came to security, or did everything just flow as normal? And I see that Kyle has posted that he was on Church Street in Toronto last night for the return of Halloween. As usual, major pinch points where it's nearly impossible for crowds to get through. So, just even something simple as a community event of kids just walking through for trick-or-treating can create, issues in higher density populations. So if anybody has something to contribute about that, or questions, even for the group, because this is where we come to share, throw your hand up or just jump right in. We'll open that up out there.
So I just posted while we're waiting, Marnie, I just posted on the chat the link for the crowd control rule of thumb on how to measure that. There was somebody quite a few years ago when I went to IFEA who did a rule of thumb, but that was like 15 years ago, and I don't know if it's changed that much. But anyway, I see Kyle's opened up, so.
There's Kyle.
Yeah, just one thing that I wanted to add in to start the conversation was we did an event this past weekend, which was a community event with the BIA, and they saw a huge flood of people come, which completely blew away their expectations. But I think one thing that maybe other events saw this year was that there was no way to really expect what their crowds would be. After a 2-year break, especially like Halloween is, a hugely anticipated holiday. After a 2-year pause from regular activities, they saw a massive flood of people. So it's, even how to respond quickly and in real time when you're seeing just numbers that you had no way to expect.
That's a very good point. And, there are events that are operated by people that are maybe new to the industry or have been operating the way things have always operated in the past. And now with, especially in Southern Ontario, where the population is definitely expanding and communities are finding larger turnouts, or people from other communities are coming in, not necessarily within the tourism draw, but, there's so many different little municipalities so close together that everybody's so anxious and ready to get out and do stuff that they are happy to support. And not having planned for that enthusiasm can definitely affect what's going to happen as they enter into and exit from the event, even the community itself. For example, was down in Toronto. That had to be about 4 years ago. And it was when the Raptors were in the playoffs, and I couldn't get near the outdoor venue where everybody was celebrating. And we were taking a bus back to Mississauga. And it took 2 hours to navigate a 1-block turn. And there's no way that I think the municipality could have even planned for that transit-wise. And not expecting that turnout. And I mean, for heaven's sakes, if the Toronto Maple Leafs ever win the cup again, I'm so glad I won't be part of that. Actually, no, I would enjoy it. But it's just these unexpected turnouts that can really change. And how do we navigate? Is there, are we putting in plan B and a plan C, because both might need to be implemented? I've seen where arts events that are normally, you might get anywhere from 100 to 200 people are now seeing 500, 600 people coming. And, they weren't expecting that. The tea and coffee and cookies is just not cutting it. You've got to put a little bit more planning into how they come in and how they experience and how they leave. So that's all part of a security measure that, has to be, there's so many different measures that we could implement, but, always a plan B for things like that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
No, you go ahead, Kyle, because
I was just going to say, it's in a way, it's a best case scenario of a best problem to have is too many people. Like for the event that we did on the weekend, they had to run and get more pumpkins for kids to decorate and had to go get more candy, and just because they were flooded. But in another way, it can become a big risk, when you have a lot more people than you expected. Pinch points, or, if something were to happen, somebody get trampled, and then there's the question of liability and security. So I know for us at events, that's one thing that we usually do from the stilts is we try to be an on the fly solution. When we see those pinch points, we try to proactively try to get people moving, get them going to other parts of the site, just keep people moving from standing in that one place, because it can become dangerous. So having elements of people that you already have on site, if they are event professionals, if they're your vendors or suppliers, everyone working together to kind of keep things moving and kind of, you may have planned the site in a certain way, but when you see crowds moving in an unexpected way, how do you then change that plan to adapt accordingly?
I was going to say that just this summer, I went to a ticketed event in downtown Toronto, and it took 40 minutes to turn left on a street. And all I could think about is where the police, where the people trying to guide manage the traffic so that it's not crazy, because there's always people coming in and trying to bypass what's going on and get ahead of the game and get ahead of the traffic. And then it made me think, well, there's a shortage of volunteers. It's a huge ripple effect that we're going through right now. So, and I don't know, volunteers, of course, on busy Toronto streets is the answer, but it was just crazy, like parking availability, and it was me thinking that we were going down early enough to get parking was a mistake on me as the consumer's part. So yeah. So how do you manage all that? And especially in smaller communities, is it easier than like a big, or a big city like Toronto? I don't know. And I'm just throwing it out there.
I think it all comes down to communication and engaging with your stakeholders and the ones that are helping you plan this event, because what a security agency and what a police force will provide you are definitely two different things. And then volunteers, you have to take a look at what authority they have within the venue that might be doing certain tasks like parking duty. And I have myself flipped from having teenagers doing the parking duty, because not a single adult ever respects the teenager if that adult is one that is arriving maybe not within the best mind frame. And unfortunately, most of the teenagers don't know how to deal with that, and other adults don't want to deal with that because as a volunteer, they're giving their time, and to be treated potentially disrespectfully is not a position of choice as a volunteer. And so then how do you mitigate that if you don't have a parking lot that is, say, privately owned and managed by a company that oversees how the parking happens, where you're parking on public property or municipally owned property where it's a big field and you've got to get vehicles in and out of there. That can become a security issue just to ensure that the parking is done correctly. And, not to mention, you don't want people going in and damaging vehicles, because not everybody arrives with the best intentions. So, it's all this communication piece, I think, that has to be done way prior to the event to plan for the best case and worst case scenarios. And, I think that small towns and larger municipalities have the same problems, just on a smaller or larger capacity. That's my 2 cents.
Kyle.
Well, yeah. And Marnie, you were talking about parking already, and I saw Liz also mentioned about parking in the chat there. I mean, that's one thing that, like parking throughout the day may be fine and normal as people come in and out. But, if you have something like fireworks, at the end of the night, when everybody tries to leave at the same time, it can take upwards of 2 hours. So I know that a fireworks festival that we work with in Mount Forest, that was a big issue, was at the end of the night, getting everyone out of the same parking lot, because everybody's leaving at the same time. Basically, you're at capacity to trying to go to zero, all in a short time. So that was one thing that we came up with, was to actually direct traffic as clowns on stilts to help get people out. So it took something that was a potential low point, and actually turned it into a highlight as people leave, and found that, actually bringing in some levity and a little bit of comedy actually helped to improve people's behavior. They actually were reminded that they're all trying to work together to get out at the same time. And we found that traffic was actually moving better. So it's just, and then that's people's final impression before, the last moment on site before coming back next year. So it's become that something that people look forward to now, is, seeing that at the end of the night. It's amazing what it can do, but parking can also be a very serious thing. There was a production assistant on a film shoot in New York, I think it was 2 years ago, who was hit by live traffic because it was someone, I don't know the exact details of what happened, but, having a volunteer or having one of your people in traffic can also be a potentially dangerous situation.
Definitely.
What about from the rest of you? Do you find, what are your security issues? Peter, Lisa, Nancy, Liz. Oh, Liz doesn't have one, so.
I can suggest something.
Yep, go ahead,
Can
Peter.
you hear me? Yeah, so talking about security issues is the security team themselves. So we usually, or always for the last 4 or 5 years, the venue we've been at, we've been required to use this security company that the venue has. And we've found that various issues with them. One of them is that they, for example, they didn't show up at the expected time in the morning, or 3/4 of them didn't show up and were late, and they didn't notify the venue. The venue didn't tell us. Very often it boils down to security. It boils down to whoever that company has hired to be on their security staff for that event. And that tends to be the weak link in the chain. So one way of trying to get around that now going forward is to require the venue to require their security company to notify the venue, if they're supposed to be there at, say, 8 a.m., to let the venue know at 7 a.m. that they're on their way and they're not delayed, for example. Because it's a liability issue. If, let's say, the security isn't in place at a certain time and something happens that shouldn't have happened, who's responsible for that?
I'll speak a little bit, if that's okay, on our event. What we find is our event is spread out throughout different venues, but we really work hand in hand with our venue, and we do a lot of site visits prior. We actually hire our own private security company as well, and we bring them on site, do a whole walkabout to make sure we hire enough security. And one big thing is you have to work with your local police department. We have a good relationship with them. So our diversity team will come out and just be on site just to help us out. And then we do hire as well, police. And a big thing that we like having out there is a cruiser, because they put their lights on and they help with the parking and just the managing of crowds. So we find that you got to plan ahead, do a lot of site visits, and have that plan A, B, C, just in case, and be able to bring in more services if you can. And with our venue, we use their parking attendants because we know they already know the event, instead of doing volunteers, because volunteer, you can't put, it's a lot of responsibility to put on a volunteer. That's our 2 cents.
Thanks, Lisa.
One security thing that Kyle's noticed is an increase in theft. Wondering if this is something others have noticed. Yes. Definitely. This summer, I was involved with a number of events across northeastern Ontario, and most of the venues, we had one security overnight because it was daytime activities. There was no nighttime activities. And we found definitely one security guard did not cut it, because large outdoor space, lots of tents, one person walking it, things can go missing very easily or damaged even. So the plan ended up about 2/3 of the way through the summer saying, you know what, we really need to bump up security. It's not a reflection on the community. It is a reflection on individuals that just don't know any better. And it created a greater cost to the overall project. And it was unfortunate that we had to do that, but in the long term, to make our marketplace individuals feel secure that, even though they weren't leaving product there, their setup was there, and they don't want that damaged. Same with the touring event, it did not want to see things damaged. So having 2 guards walking the property throughout the dark hours of the night and wee hours of the morning created a little bit more sense of security. And I think it is the way things are going to be going. No longer do you have to worry just about the little hooligans from town, but some with more malicious intent. It's sad, but I see where that's a necessity. Love planning venues that are indoors because you can lock those doors and go home at night, but the outdoor events, which is the major component of what does happen throughout the festival season, I see that is increasing in cost, and staffing it on behalf of the security company has risen in cost because they can't get staff. It's been a big difficult curve that's been thrown to us in the industry, where staffing across the board in events has really become a difficult thing to manage. So not just the planning of an event for security, but getting security that can actually put somebody in the role has been a little challenging.
Kyle has a question.
Okay.
I just wanted to add something. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jean.
Okay. We are new festival in Milton. We go to the 3rd edition next year, but the last 2 editions we did not have security problem, but we feel that the for us the problem of security is related to the financial support, because we keep growing. Now, if you don't have financial support, it's not easy to hire a security company or people with security professional to really help us to go. So that's our worry for the next year festival. But the past 2 editions, everything is okay. We are parking, Milton Community Park, no problem, we are parking. But I know we're gonna have this problem, security issue, we're gonna have that. But really, when we have a new festival, it's not easy to get funding. We struggle. Even last year, we didn't get any funding. We just do fundraising and also use our own network to get financial support. That's the thing that you have. But if next year you don't know what's going to happen, if you have financial issue, it's going to be difficult for us also to high security. That's what it is.
Jean, are you talking about funding like Celebrate or Reconnect? Is that what you were saying? The grants or?
Yeah, grant, yeah.
Okay.
Grant, yeah.
Okay. and I know the demand has increased on grants a whole lot. Like there's a lot of festivals who are asking for grants, and I don't think the amount of money has changed. So it's become quite a challenge for a lot of people. There's a lot of events that didn't get any funding.
Yeah.
And as far as security goes, yeah, absolutely. You need money for security because
Yeah.
you're not going to do it for free, these companies. Kyle, you had something.
Yeah, I was just going to mention on on the topic of theft. There was one event we worked with this year, which was put on by a charity, and something that they had never seen before was, large speakers going missing, which is it's just, a big deal. And just, I mean, obviously they were rentals and they did have the insurance, but, even something to keep in mind is something that you think that might be difficult to move. Keeping in mind that insurance, the insurance actually only goes up to a certain dollar amount. Then something like, your event, or if you're a charity that puts it on, may have to cover the other amount. So just the importance of, having like nighttime security. Even what they found they had to do was take down everything at night, put it away into locked cubes. Cause it's, if someone has the opportunity, they might take it. So it's just, taking those extra measures, and being very well aware of what your insurance is.
How does like, I mean, talking about security, it just brings up many years ago, and I don't know if it's happening today, alcohol play in all this. I mean, your security people, there was an incident many years ago where somebody left, they were a volunteer and left the grounds drunk and ended up driving their car through a home. And the security, well, I don't know the whole story. All I know is that she was allowed to get into the car. How do your security people deal with that? Like, what kind of training is that? Training that the security people the company does with their people? It's part of Smart Serve. Anyways, just throwing that out there with security and alcohol, and how much your patronage is taking in. How do you manage that other than Smart Serve? Or do you?
With one of the events that I managed for about 12 years, we set the main food and beverage tent was the one that would be licensed for the alcohol, and the winner of the RFP would be the license holder. And the onus was on them within the licensed area to provide security, and that it was mandatory that their staff were all Smart Serve certified. And we had adult volunteers at the parking lots well into the evening, so that if they happened to notice that somebody was getting into a vehicle under the influence, with their walkie-talkies, they were able to communicate with the local police force and give the license plate number. It's kind of snitching, but we were able, out of the two main parking lots, that the police, being very well aware that the event was happening, would have cruisers stationed within the vicinity. And these vehicles, in one particular instance, didn't even get out of the parking lot, like the nose was at the roadway. And the officer came over and said, "Excuse me, have you been drinking?" Luckily, there was 2 incidences in 12 years, and it was nipped in the bud. But again, that was a communication plan that we had put in with the RFP winner that held the license, as well as the local police and training with the volunteers. It's very intensive. It's very scary because there's always one that can get away, and even if they've made plans to get home, Uber, taxi, and then they decide to go somewhere else and something happens, it still comes back onto the festival. And there's no 100% wave of responsibility, there is always that 1%. And that one festival that you were talking about, Debbie, it all came back onto the board and the committee.
I know.
And
Yeah.
it was very, very unfortunate, but it's hard to manage because some people can hold that liquor really good, and you don't know till they've left. Having picked up hundreds of bottles along a shoreline after the event, we know a lot of the drinking was not happening inside of the licensed area. It's like an octopus of so many tentacles of everything happening at once that could go wrong. And I think it's just keeping on it and working with a really good team. I think that would really,
I know
help.
here, I know Peter has unmuted himself, but I'll just say here in Kitchener, there's for Oktoberfest, Oktoberfest has changed this year a bit, but there were a lot of ride programs, there were buses, and there was a group, the Red Nose group, that would, they would have cars, and they would have two people who would volunteer through the night. Somebody would call them, and they would come with two people, and one would drive the person home and the other would drive the car belonging to the person home. Yeah, so I know there's a lot of different options out there, but it's pretty scary when you're running an event. Peter, over to you.
Oh, so can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, my mic has been acting up. So I wonder if I'm not a lawyer, but one thing I imagine is there's things you can do legally, like in a contract with vendors, etc. There's sections that they have to initial aside from signing the bottom. So things that we really want them to pay attention to, so that we're sure that they're aware of things that say liquor or security issues. And so I think one thing I think is how, if I was, say, in a court of law and had to defend myself because someone did something, and did I take proper measures? So there's things you can do like legally to show legal agreements and stuff, but there's also more like intent. And I think that's something that Marnie seems to be alluding to is just having like not only covering your butt legally, but also sort of morally, to make sure that this thing really doesn't happen, not only because you don't want to get in legal trouble, but because you want to preserve human health and safety. Is there something to that, Marnie?
Yes, going above and beyond the basic provisions to keep people safe at your event. Liz has actually provided in the chat exactly what I was going to say, that the municipality made free transit for the night because they knew a lot of people would be drinking. You can make arrangements with the municipal buses, local taxis, even school bus companies, which don't normally run during the summertime. So they have a lot of staff that are looking for hours. We've worked with the local school buses that provide throughout the day and evening pick up and drop off points to the festival, so that those who wish to imbibe, aside from those that would like to get there but may not be financially able to get there, they have a way, and it goes right until the event closes for the night or the day. And you have that provision that we did provide this person opted to make that cognitive choice to drink and drive, or stumble into somebody's home accidentally, whatever the incident might be. Showing that you have smart serve people, that you have people identifying that there are options for their transportation to and from. I don't know how well it goes in other municipalities that provide licensed events, but selling only so many tickets for alcohol at a time, like a minimum of 3 or 4, it all depends on the crowd that you're going to be dealing with. Some may not like that forced option of you can only buy so many tickets at a time, because you want to control the drinking and driving, or the atmosphere of the event. If you're going to have, say, a wine tasting, it's not going to be a free for all. It's very limited. You're still accountable for the people that are drinking there, but if you stretch it out over the course of the evening, it all depends on the event.
So back to your thing about intent, and more than just having rules, but being truly invested in what you're doing to prevent any kind of incident, right? So I have a question about the liability aspect of security. I wonder if there are a lot of festivals that are just run by individuals; they're not incorporated. Because as I understand, if you're incorporated, that gives you some level of protection. So it would behoove people who run a festival or event and they're not incorporated in any way. They're maybe just a sole proprietorship, or not even. They should be incorporated, number one. And then, even then, if you have, say, a board, should you have some sort of additional level of insurance for your board members?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because you need as much protection as possible. Even if you're a sole proprietorship, you should have insurance, and have that discussion with the insurance company that part of my business will be, I will be running events. Even hairdressing shops that over the Christmas holidays into New Year's have had those little, their regulars will book for a certain day and they have mimosas. You're still responsible for that person having a mimosa after they've got their hair did. And, they have to have that special permit with the health unit. They have to have, their insurance has to know that it is happening, that it is a special event, and that would protect them. If there's, say, for example, a lot of downtown BIAs host those events in the summertime during the day. And, there's food and who knows, they may be progressive and have alcohol sampling. They have to have the insurance to do that. They're not an event organizer, but they should have that event happening. Chamber of Commerces tend to put on events all the time. And they're not event organizers officially. They're in the business of supporting business. But again, they need to have that license and insurance event completely covered. So there are different insurance options, through the business insurance. One that it just pops to mind because it's the one I always seem to use is PAL insurance, which is very aware of the event industry and very easy to work with. There's options. There's no excuses other than not being aware, like a new business owner or an individual who decides, I'm going to throw a country concert. It's a big learning curve. I'm a prime example of that. Someday we'll have that discussion for my first event I ever ran. But it's doing the research and going to events and seeing what has to happen and having talks with the event organizers. You have to have shown that your intent for the event is transparent, that you're ensuring that everybody has safety measures available to them, that you've got the insurance to cover the committee or the individual or the business or the organization that's running the event, because it will be costly, extremely costly, if something bad happens and you don't have that coverage, because then they come after you personally. And I know myself, I don't have a few million to throw away on an event that, somebody got hurt because we didn't take all the right steps and include the insurance with that.
So when you say they come after you personally, that's even if you're working in an incorporated festival or event?
No, you should be the event that is incorporated should have the insurance, and that should be protecting the board. Now that should be another topic that we cover more in depth a little bit further on, because the insurance industry is its whole own topic alone.
Yes, absolutely.
And but if you have a board and a committee, you should have insurance to cover those individuals. And that's where, when getting sued, that's where they would be going to. If there's not, then it goes after the individuals involved.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it gets pretty messy, as that event experienced quite a few years ago, and it shut down because of it. So
Inflatables, alcohol aside, a few years back, just a few weeks before the event, the insurance company said, yeah, you can't have inflatables at your event because it's not covered. Beg pardon? That's a whole demographic of 3 to 9 year olds that are now don't have an activity because of an incident that happened where the inflatables were not tethered down and the winds picked up, not at our event, and they went tumbling and people were injured. So now the industry, unless you have that in your policy, it's a good idea to have a chat with your industry, insurance industry representative.
and that brings something up like weather insurance.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that again, we can have a whole session on insurance, but there's weather insurance. I mean, we look at that storm a few years ago that just knocked down a stage. And do you have your security in place to even, get your crowds out? There's a tornado coming through. Do you have an exit? What do they call it? An exit plan for your people who are there. There's just a lot of things. There were roadies who were injured. There were some that were killed because of the stage collapsing. I think you've all heard of it. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal to think about where you can afford the insurance. And I think that there was an event in Cambridge that got rained out 3 years in a row. I don't think that they survived that. So I don't know, Nancy, if you remember what one it is, but yeah.
Well, it's more than one, actually.
Okay.
Our Scottish festival.
Yeah.
They survived, but I remember it was one of those days that just kept raining and raining and raining, raining, raining. And even the day of, I was out there doing, it wasn't my event, I was volunteering at that event to help out the staff liaison. And I was, doing the parking thing, and it was just puddles. Let me rephrase, wading pools of water, to the point where we didn't even last mid-morning before the event had to be shut down. It was an outdoor event, but it was just literally where the water was just starting to pool and flood. And so that was the Scottish festival. So they have survived because they just recently had one this summer again. The Cambridge Arts Festival, it was unlucky. They've always had, I don't know why, just lately, last few years, and they've never had these issues before, but weather struggles. So there was high winds taking down the tents, and these were tents that were weighted down, but still very damaging to the event, finally getting fed up after so many years and moving their event date and event location. And I still remember this, where their people are swimming in the parking lot because the rain was so heavy, again, days and days and days leading up to the event. And then on the day of the event, where the sewer system couldn't keep up. And so the parking lot was just flooding. And I still remember seeing one of the volunteers was swimming in the parking lot.
Wow.
Before we finally, we had shut down the event already, and we were just trying to stay dry under the tents until the deluge came down. So they didn't have one. So that was pre-pandemic. So they didn't have one this year. I'm trying to think of another one. Millrace Festival. So one year, and this was one of my events. And again, same story. This was an incorporated event, board, very high level, 18 people around the table planning this event that had 12 stages in the outdoor downtown core. And we had about 150 volunteers, every, and it was for over 3 days. And I remember the winds were so strong that one year, and again, a tent weighted down properly, and municipality, right? So we risk manage everything. And I remember that tent got picked up by the wind, and it was a 10 by 10, turned, and it went across the breezeway. And I was so helpless because I was just watching this unfold in front of me. And all we could yell was Eldon Duck, who was our site coordinator, and he ducked as this tent with the weights passed by him. And the weights were dragged on the ground. So it's incredible how extreme the weather has gotten lately. Last few years. So yeah, there's Cambridge.
Yeah, that's just Cambridge. But, you know, even just the weather, getting weather insurance, I don't know if we think it's important enough. Like, I think it's just something we have to consider. Liz wrote, we have weapons on site, which not everybody does, which adds a layer of security concern. Waivers are really important for us. We also peace tie everything. So she's a medieval fair, so they have their knights in shining armor coming out with and fighting for, I'm making this up, Liz, but fighting for the the attention of the princess. I don't know, making it up. But imagine, like, even if those got stolen, right? It's just, oh no, that's correct. There are 5 tournaments. There you go. Woohoo. Kyle said that's an interesting point too. Has your footprint been designed for a variety of weather situations? Even having all the sunny days can pose a hazard if there's no place for people to find shade or cool down. Yeah. And I've noticed that some events now have a misting tent, and just for that ability to walk through and just cool down for a second. So. Anything, Kyle?
Yeah, those misting tents are really important. I mean, for years of being on the stilts, I could see people like being out in the sun all day, getting hot, and they're not aware of it. But like you can see on their skin, they've turned bright red. So having spaces, like if you're an outdoor festival that's just a wide open field, having tents can be spaces for people to cool down, which is, you know, preventing sunstroke or heat stroke, or just, you know, if you do get a day where it's just like there's just bands of rain coming, if you have spaces where people can suddenly like temporarily go find shelter, as soon as that sky clears up, they all come right back out. If there's nowhere for them to go, they're probably going to go to their car and probably leave the site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's interesting, Kyle. I was just thinking about you as a busker. Does it, like, do you have to have special insurance and for the events that you work on? Because it's not just the events, right? It's the suppliers that you're working with and the products and services. So, because when you were talking about the crowd control, I had visions of somebody tackling you on your stilts.
Well, and that's actually an interesting conversation that's happening in among stilt walkers right now, is just seeing an increase in aggression, which is just, you know, I mean, after the past couple of years, maybe it's a temporary thing, but yeah, we absolutely carry insurance, and I've always tried to carry more than the minimum, because, you know, some municipalities or venues will require more. So I as a blanket policy, I try to cover everything. But also, like, some of my colleagues use fire, and they absolutely get insurance for that. But for myself, I designed a show that didn't use fire, just so that I could save on insurance. Obviously, if there's an instance where I do then need to use fire, I will obviously get the upgrade. But yeah, for buskers, street performers, any entertainers, really, even face painters, I mean, making sure that you have liability insurance is hugely important. And then having that conversation between organizers and your suppliers about, you know, whether you need certificates that have the additional insured, so that, you know, if something does happen, that your legal teams can work together. All really important things to have, and having the conversations early, because sometimes it takes a while for insurance certificate. It's probably like, oh yeah, can I get that today? No. I don't know any insurance agent who's, you know, that fast on turning things over. Maybe there are really awesome insurance agents out there, but for myself, I know they usually need like a few days or a couple weeks,
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that additional insured part. I mean, I run a conference, not a festival, but man, the marketplace people in the beginning really pushed back on that, and it's not an option for us anymore. So nothing's happened, but you just never know.
It should definitely be part of any critical path for an event, that if you have a marketplace, if you have talent, if you have food trucks, if you have alcohol, whoever's bringing in the alcohol, that on that tick box list is, oh, proof of insurance and additional insured must be before you get on site, because it takes one trip and fall and boom, there goes the event. We don't want that. We don't want that.
Exactly.
I will mention though, just just in case you're a festival that requires someone to provide proof of insurance with an application to take part, just to keep in mind that sometimes, like for myself, I know that I need to be confirmed at an event and have a contract and invoice in place in order to get that. So it's I might not be, especially with the additional insured and things like that. So just keeping in mind that may need to follow.
Right. You can't do it beforehand, because you guys would apply for a lot of places that you might not get hired and spend a lot of money on insurance, right? That you can't use.
And it's a lot of time, a lot of paperwork. And I know my insurer would also be very annoyed.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Anything else, Marnie?
No, I think we've covered just about everything and more, and I'm hoping that we can circle around at some point and do an insurance talk the one day, because there's so many layers to that I think it would be really great for the group to participate in. So you can put that on a pegboard somewhere, and because that is a really huge part about security.
It would be great to have a lawyer and an insurance industry person in the talk, because I'm told certain things over the years. I've often wondered, and I don't expect an answer here today, but when we get that additional insured and proof of insurance, we have to get it from every vendor. And one thing I've been told is that if something happens and it turns out we didn't get a proof of insurance from even one vendor, that somehow nullifies our insurance. And is that really true, or is that just a scare tactic? I don't expect an answer today, but I'd love to drill down on this in a forum in the future with truthful answers.
I agree, because that is news to me. If that is a new thing, boy, do I have to update my critical path.
And I don't know. You see, these are things that insurance brokers have told me, but there's also salespeople. So that's why I say I'd like an honest industry rep and a lawyer who can tell us without a sales motive in what they're explaining.
Yeah, and Liz says here, I think it depends on your policy, but I think it also depends on your event. I think there's a lot of factors to it. So I'll look into that, and we'll get back to you all on it. Anybody have anything else? Nope. Jean, do you have anything? You popped on. No, you're good? I can't hear you. You're muted. Jean, you're muted. Jean, can't hear you. You're muted. There you go.
Well, like Peter said, we need to have a section where we're going to have an insurance company to be here, and also to well clarify exactly what kind of insurance you need for a festival.
Okay.
And to develop any aspect of the insurance for the event, for each event. Yeah.
And and that gets complicated, right? Because it depends on the event. Now, all of you can answer this, and I'm making this assumption, but who's going to be attending? What kind of, is it a music event? Is it a rodeo? Is it a busker? Is it a street event? Can you guys answer that? Like, does your insurance depend on what kind of event it is? Or
Yeah,
is it-
yeah. That's why we
Does
need.
it?
That's why we need insurance company for different event
Okay,
to explain for different event because
right.
music festival or I don't know
Food festival
food
or
festival
cultural
or whatever
festival, yeah.
festival. We need insurance company to help us to understand what kind of insurance we need to cover our event.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good point, Jean. Thank you.
I know with the one insurance company that a lot of events tend to use, there's a online form that you fill in to give the details about your event, and then they come back to you with a quote. But I always suggest following that up with a conversation, because sometimes you forget something. It's very, very simple. And, you know, you can have these discussions with them because just a blanket insurance sometimes is not going to be applicable for a small, say, arts event, as opposed to something massive like the Blues Fest, you know? And, you know, what are the price? And you have the discussions definitely regarding the pricing and, you know, what all it entails. Just don't print off and say, yes, send the check or what have you. Read into that, what that does cover you, because it could be missing something that you desperately need to have covered. You know, a municipality may have certain requirements that you're covered for in your insurance, and it could be easily missed. And, you know, we don't want to see that happen. But I think having that conversation is a good idea with the industry.
So so it brings up a good question. If your event is on municipal property versus private property, will that make a difference in the insurance policy? Or do you know?
Don't know. And this is something we could find out, I think, because, you know, we have additional insured, definitely on a municipal property. And I know Catherine up in Thunder Bay could probably confirm that, having worked with her this summer. It's on there. You have to have that covered. But on a private property,
Yeah.
you know,
I have
Yeah.
during my two past festivals, I did with Park Canada. For Park Canada, sometimes they talk about if you use the music of some professional artists, also we have the insurance that you need to get it.
Okay.
Or if you if you go only with for amateur, also we have insurance that you need to cover that. So I want with 2 years, but I need to know more clarification if someone
Right.
can be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Marnie and I will look into that and maybe do maybe instead of the festivals helping festivals, we can do a Tuesday talks, but it can be this kind of format. So yeah, Liz says that's also sounds like a copyright licensing. So there you go, Jean. So
and with everything having changed over the last few years,
Yeah.
probably
You know?
great to have an update from the insurance companies about
Yes.
you know what they're looking for. I think would be I think it would be fortuitous.
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, we'll look into that for sure. Thanks everyone for that suggestion. If there's nothing else, it's an hour already gone by. So we're going to close up now. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marnie, again for your insight and expertise, and everyone who participated. Thank you. We are back next week, and oh, I forgot to look, but next week I believe I have Rafflebox coming in next Tuesday. So Rafflebox wants to come back and do another session. So I hope to see you then. Is that right, Jay? Rafflebox? And
I believe it's Amanda Murray for the awards.
oh, thank you. Amanda Murray for the awards. So anything you want to know about applying for awards is all next week. So, and then I think I have Rafflebox, and then I have Dog Lover Days lure course. So it's going to be a good month, and I hope you've registered for it, and I hope you registered for the other festivals, helping festivals, because they have kind of sold out. So we're excited. Thank you for that. And I will get this recording off to you. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for your participation, and we will see you next week. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Great session today, everyone.